Wide! Pre-game, post-game, every game. Wadden and JPat here with you. Rink Wide is presented by Bodog. Make a play at Canada's Choice for free casino games, sports odds, and poker strategies. That's right, JPat. Pre-game, post-game, every game. We're here with you. Not only that, training camp as well, as we're here in Whistler. Day 2, Canucks are on the ice.
Hang on a sec. I'm taking notes here. Pre-game, post-game, every game, and training camp. Wow.
Put it on the list.
Yeah. And we are coming to you from Whistler here after day 2 of this 3-day training camp at the Meadow Park Sports Center. They're playing games this weekend, which is, it's awesome, but it also is crazy because they're 2 days into training camp. And on Sunday afternoon, a split squad with the Calgary Flames, one in Vancouver, one in Calgary. And then we're truly into the post game. We'll kick things off this weekend. So it's been a long time coming. Looking forward to it. Hockey season upon us. And it is. I was in Penticton last week, and that was great. But it's good to be here at Whistler to see the big boys and to see some of the new faces. And, first impressions are that, and I'm sure there's 31 other teams that say the same thing, but like impressed by the pace and the tempo. We did wonder what would a Bruce Boudreau training camp look like compared to a Travis Green training camp. Obviously, the bag skate hasn't been a part of Bruce Boudreau's bag of tricks, but he has been working these guys hard. Skating them at times within these sessions, but just a lot of, there's a lot of drills that were designed to sort of mimic game situations. And he said that right off the hop. Like, he's not wasting time up here. He doesn't want to experiment. And so one of the big questions the last time we recorded was, what would the line combinations look like? Who was going to skate with whom? We've got some answers now.
When you see those lines out there, like, what sort of stands out to you, amongst, because it looks like what we've seen is really what Bruce Boudreau is going to go with early on in the season. Is there anything that sort of jumped out at you that you like, maybe perhaps dislike?
I was expecting that Miller, Besser, and Pearson would be a line. And so when they were trotted out on day 1, wasn't a surprise there. But then the question was, all right, where are the other dominoes going to fall? And so to see Ilya Pettersson get the 2 Russians, I love that for Kuzmenko. I thought Kuzmenko, they might kind of ease him in kind of a third line capacity, but no, they're saying, hey, you're here, you're on the ground now. We're going to put you with one of our most talented, if not most talented centers. What an opportunity for Andrei Kuzmenko. And he's had some moments, and look, it's all relative. This is training camp. I recognize that. I know people are excited, but this is all we have to work with. And 2 days in, there have been some moments for Kuzmenko on Friday morning, just during line rushes, standard line rushes, but 2 in a row where he just picked his spot and snapped it home, and made goal scoring look easy. And there was a wow factor in the building, and there was a reaction from the people that were there. And, again, this is all we have to go by on this guy right now, but so far so good. And on that line, Mikeyhev, has come as advertised. You can see his speed, even when they're, this goes beyond the scrimmages, just looking in some of the, the zone drills that they've done and some of the line rushes. Like, this guy, he skates differently. It looks different when he's out there. So I like that line. I'm still a little, I don't know if I'm concerned, but I need to see it in game action. Horvat, Garland, Podkolzin. Horvat and Podkolzin make some sense to me, but Garland is an independent contractor with the spins and shooting from all angles. And, you hope that those other 2 guys, I guess, can use their size, win puck battles, get the puck to Connor Garland in scoring positions. But that one feels like it's going to be a bit more of a work in progress than those other 2 lines, because Miller, Pearson, and Besser, they had some success, especially immediately when Bruce Boudreau took over. And I think back to a game in San Jose where they were lights out good. The Sharks never touched the puck. I think Besser scored twice, if I'm not mistaken. Pearson had a goal as well. So there is sort of some tried and true to that. Obviously, Pettersson with the Russians is going to be an experiment, but there's a ton of skill there, and there's reasons to like that. And I'll say this too, and people probably saw this in social spaces after day 1. Elias Pettersson does look dialed in. He looks like he has, it looks like he means business, and that's a great sign for him and the team and the fan base. Again, only 2 days of practice, but just from what I've seen from Elias Pettersson, he looks like, when you think he wasn't even here at this time last year, right? The contract situation got him into camp late and into the preseason. He is here, he's on the ground, and he has hit the ground running. And I just, I want to see him play some games here because he looks like he's ready to burst out.
Yeah, and one of the drills today, he had a real big snipe, like just a beautiful classic Elias Pettersson shot. Yeah, he does look dialed in. Kuzmenko, though, honestly, I think he has a more of a chance to be a success in the NHL than he does to be a bust. Like, he looks the part out there. Like, he looks like he is ready for NHL action. I know just from talking to some of our colleagues, I was having a chat with Harman Dial, and Harman was saying that there, perhaps could be some question marks around his defensive side of his game. And obviously, that's a tougher thing to sort of tackle in the NHL, especially coming from a league like the KHL. But, if he's going to have to get better defensively, sure. But offensively, I think he's there, JPat. And just on the ice, I couldn't take my eyes off him. I'm suspecting that he's going to have a big year, and I think this is going to be massive for the Canucks.
Well, I thought it was really interesting when Bruce Boudreau did his pre-training camp media on Wednesday, and I asked him about Kuzmenko and what he'd be looking for as he starts to evaluate him here in Whistler. And he said it wasn't so much here at training camp, but it's once you get into games. He was talking about shift length, and he said, like, I've seen this before with other guys that come from the KHL. They want to stay out for a minute and a half, and it's not going to fly in the National Hockey League. And so, he said that's one of the things, like 40 seconds, give us your best 40 seconds and get off. And, I'm in no position. I haven't seen the guy play a game, but it will be interesting to watch. And clearly the coaching staff is going to implore that to Andrei Kuzmenko, that you can't get your best. The league's too good. If you're, hogging ice time and staying out and extending your shifts, you're going to run into problems, and then the team will run into problems. So something to watch as we roll into the preseason here starting this weekend. And I don't know if they're going to run Kuzmenko out on home ice on Sunday just to introduce him to the fans. I wouldn't be surprised if he was part of the group that stayed and played in Vancouver. Whatever the case, at some point here over the next week, Andrei Kuzmenko is going to get a chance to play in a Canuck uniform, and it's going to be a ton of fun to watch as he steps onto NHL ice for the first time.
What do you think of Mikeyhev out there? The speed is obvious. Anything else that sort of stand out for you?
Yeah, I think I was glad to see, because I know we've had this discussion about creating lots of chances, maybe not a lot of finish. Mm-hmm. I wasn't sitting there charting every line rush where he had the puck, but I was pleasantly surprised to see him trying to be creative in a lot of the one-on-one drills, and, trying to put skill on display and, deke around guys and through guys. Now, you don't want that all the time in the National Hockey League. You got to use your teammates, but in one-on-one drills, he wasn't just relying on his speed. So I thought that's a good sign that, he's trying to get the hands to get up to game speed here in the preseason and in training camp. And that's kind of what training camp is for. So, first and foremost, though, is his speed. And again, I just think he skates. It looks different than a lot of the guys. So many of the guys, it's laborious. You can see how hard they're working to accelerate. And this guy makes it look effortless. And so I think he is going to be fun to watch as the season rolls along here.
Danny DeKeyser trying to make the team out there. One of the things that I notice is his size. And especially when you put him up there with Tyler Myers, like, they could be an impact sort of duo together. I'm wondering if DeKeyser's game is going to be there. But from what I saw here, and this is the first day that I've been here at training camp, you've been here for 2 days now. From what I saw, though, I think there's potential there. And I think the Canucks, obviously he's on a PTO, so he could have his a choice of going elsewhere. But the Canucks might have found something there with DeKeyser, and they could be cooking with gas, putting him with Tyler Myers.
I watched him pretty closely on Friday. I'll admit he was one of the guys that was sort of in my sights, and I was watching Kuzmenko and Mikeyhev, and you can't not watch Elias Pettersson when he's out there. But in that morning group, I was like, all right, I'm going to keep a close eye on Dan DeKeyser. He's 32. He played 59 games for the Detroit Red Wings last year. No goals, 11 assists. He's never going to be a point generator. That's certainly not why the Canucks brought him in here. A couple of years removed from back surgery. So a 32-year-old stay-at-home defenseman, we're talking about back surgery. Like, that's a red flag. So I wanted to see, like, how mobile is he? He's not a fluid skater. I'm not sure that he ever was, and certainly at this stage of his career, especially when we're talking about a guy like Mikeyhev. But you're right. Like, remember Red Rover, like the kids game. You line DeKeyser and Myers up across the blue line. Like, there's nowhere for the opponents to go side to side. Like, those guys cover a lot of ground. Myers obviously is, now with Chara gone, he's the tallest guy in the NHL, but DeKeyser's got size, no question about that. And the fact that they're paired together, I think tells you something, that the Vancouver Canucks, they're not pairing Dan DeKeyser with a minor league guy or another guy on a PTO, like they bring him in there. And say what you will about Tyler Myers, and he's not for everybody, but he's one of the better defensemen that the Vancouver Canucks have. Like, again, we can sit here and talk about the defense core 1 through 6, but Tyler Myers on this team is one of their better defenders, and they've put Dan DeKeyser with him from day one. And it just makes you wonder if this OEL Hughes pairing that they are trying here in camp as well, if that remains a thing, is there an opportunity then for DeKeyser and Myers to play more of a defensive role the way that OEL and Myers, remember last year, basically the team said, don't worry about offense, guys. Like, OEL, we know that you've been a scorer in the past. Like, you're here to defend and to prevent goals. And they were a good pairing. They were fine defensively. And I wonder if the thinking there is that OEL plays with Hughes and it opens the door for a guy like Dan DeKeyser. So, 2 games or 2 practices in, you're not going to write the book on Dan DeKeyser. He's not going to make or break his chances with the Canucks here in Whistler. I think he needs some game action, but we know that penalty killing was an issue early on. It got better under Bruce Boudreau, but I still think that maybe there is an opportunity for, if that's where he can contribute to this hockey club. So PTOs are funny things because, as you said, it's not just auditioning for the Canucks. It's trying to get the attention of the rest of the National Hockey League, but there's also a time element, right? Like, we're 2 days into camp. Who knows how many preseason games DeKeyser might get to play in? I'm doubting he would dress for every single one, and he can't play both of the games on Sunday, obviously. But, there is a time crunch. If he's going to earn a contract and he's going to be ready to start the season, decisions have to be made. So, this is a veteran guy, even though he's not had to do the PTO thing before, but I think he understands that you've got to bring it. You've got to prove to the Canucks first and foremost. But in so doing, you're proving to the rest of the National Hockey League that, hey, you can still play. He was a healthy scratch at times on a bad Detroit team last year. So I think it's not a shock that he didn't get a contract in the offseason, but he is here. He's chosen to be here on a PTO. And I would say 2 days in, he's looked all right.
Yeah, and we heard from him after their session today, and he just spoke with the media saying he's here to make this team.
Yeah, it's been good. It's been a hard couple of days. We've been skating a lot and battling out there. So, it's definitely good to get the season going again. Just getting an opportunity to be paired with Mizey out there is it's a lot of fun. He's massive. He covers a lot of ice. And he talks a lot out there, so he's good to play with. I'm just here trying to obviously grab a spot if I can and play as hard as I can. So. That's for me. That's be responsible defensively, move the puck out of the zone as quick as I can, and help out on the PK.
And I know during the offseason, the defense was obviously a big discussion for many people, fans, media, etc. But as I watched the session today, a few things stood out. DeKeyser looked good with Myers. Myers looked good. Myers was winning a lot of battles, and as he does, especially a man his size. But Tucker Poolman looked good out there as well. Jumped up into the play a couple times, scored a goal in the scrimmage, a nice one at that. I tweeted he looks like a sniper. Maybe this might be something of a strength for the Canucks, especially if they can add a player like DeKeyser and, he can contribute.
Yeah, and one of the things that jumped out at me yesterday when they unveiled they've got 3 training camp groups here essentially, and so I was curious to see who was skating with whom, not just the forward lines, but the defense pairings as well. And so OEL and Hughes, like that's a storyline with Hughes on the right side. DeKeyser with Myers, Dan DeKeyser into the spotlight here. That's a story there. Then you go like Jack Rathbone and Luke Schenn versus Travis Dermott and Tucker Poolman. Like, which is the third pairing? And I would say that, for me, Jack Rathbone has looked good, as you would expect. He says he had a good offseason of training, and he's here to force the hand of management. But I still think he's in prove-it mode, especially to this coaching staff for whom he didn't play last year. I think Travis Dermott's in their top 6. I don't know exactly where he slots in, but just by that reasoning, whoever's playing with Travis Dermott, to me, is probably in the top 6 as well. So I would say right here, right now, 2 days into this thing, that Poolman and Dermott, in my mind, probably the third pair, leaving Rathbone and Luke Schenn as your 7 and 8. Now, Luke Schenn became an everyday guy last year for the Vancouver Canucks. We all know that the teammates love him. The fans love him. He's the sheriff. He's going to stick up for his teammates. There are nights that absolutely you want Luke Schenn in your lineup, but I do think at this stage, and we watched through those informal skates out at 8 rinks, and the fact that Tucker Poolman was able to show up and keep up, and there were questions coming into that, and here he is a couple of days in the camp now, and I would say this is a good news story right now that just on a health level for Tucker Poolman, and I know he was asked about it repeatedly on Thursday, and he didn't want any part of it. That's the past. I'm here. I'm feeling good. Look. I just want the guy to be healthy first and foremost, to be able to live a life. And, I think it's got to be on that. Like, he looks like he's going to be able to resume his hockey career. Now, how much utility he's going to have, ultimately, what role can he play for the Vancouver Canucks? That's still going to be determined, but he at least gives them another option. So I think you can sit here and have a fairly healthy debate. Would you want Dermott and Poolman, or would you prefer Rathbone and Schenn as your 5th and 6th guys? And they all bring us something a little bit different. So, we'll see where it goes. But beyond that, we do talk an awful lot about the depth of the Canucks defense. And then you get to guys like Kyle Burrows, who, we just listed off 8 guys, and Burrows not one of them. So he's a little bit deeper down. Noah Juleson, I think, still thinks that maybe there's an opportunity for him to get a call from time to time, if injuries set in. Brady Keeper's on that right side, and he said, he's here to make life difficult on the coaching staff as well. So, it's not, these aren't big names. I understand that, but they've all played in the National Hockey League. So, varying degrees. Keeper, I think, has 2 games of NHL experience, but Juleson's got a little bit more than that. And then we saw Kyle Burrows last year. We all thought that he was going to shuttle between Abbotsford and Vancouver, but he found a way with other injuries and with his own performance to stay with the big league team. So, there is some depth below that group of 8 that we talked about. But, I think it's going to be difficult for a guy like Kyle Burrows, just because, if Poolman is healthy, and now that they've got Dermott, who wasn't here at training camp a year ago, and then you bring in a Dan DeKeyser, you want internal competition. And I think that's ultimately what they are providing for this hockey club by bringing in some of these additional bodies.
You talk about Jack Rathbone. Here's a player that started with the big club last year, went back down to the AHL, had himself a sensational year at the AHL, over a point a game player. But you mentioned that he wants to force the hand to be able to make the big club. Here's Jack Rathbone speaking to the media after the session today.
I'm kind of more worried about myself in my own game at this point, where I think I'm hopefully able to force their hand into no matter where Huggy is, hopefully be able to stick. And but it's definitely gonna be tough, and we got a lot of good players here, so I think that competition just breeds a better hockey team.
Yeah, and he was asked about Quinn Hughes perhaps moving over to the right side and whether that would benefit him. And that's why he started about saying, listen, I just got to focus on my own game. But, this is a big year for Jack Rathbone. And as you sort of break down, what the pairings could be, and you look at him playing with a player like Rathbone, if Dan DeKeyser can make this team and be with Tyler Myers, there's your shutdown pair there. Might give Jack Rathbone more of an opportunity to sort of be himself, if you will.
Yeah. Now, keep in mind, and this is where it all gets a little bit prickly for the Vancouver Canucks, is Dan DeKeyser isn't costing them a dime right now on a PTO. If he makes this team, he needs a contract, and even at a league minimum, and who knows, I can't imagine the Canucks would have a whole lot more to offer because we know that they're up against it. Mm-hmm. But every dollar spent matters. And so, you just have to remember that if DeKeyser puts his best foot forward, it's going to force the Vancouver Canucks, and that signing could have implications again for a guy like Rathbone, who is, waiver exempt to start the season. You've got the one-way contract, and I think the Canucks think that he's here to stay, but how are they going to go with 8 defensemen and 13 forwards? Or are they going to go with 2 extra forwards and 1 healthy defenseman? So, there are roster decisions, there's contractual decisions, all of that to be determined, and a lot of it is going to be dependent on how well Dan DeKeyser continues to play and perform for the Vancouver Canucks as they break camp here and get into preseason games.
Yeah, I'm just wanting to open up Cap Friendly here to see what Keeper's status is in terms of whether he's going to be exempt from waivers as well, because maybe there's your answer there. Guys that are just going to be exempt, and they'll try to go with the guys that aren't at the moment, and maybe that gives an opportunity for Dan DeKeyser. But you're absolutely right. They're going to have to shuffle some money around if they're going to want to sign somebody else. Let's hear from Brady Keeper, though, because Brady Keeper obviously had that gruesome injury at training camp. Last year, he's trying to make the big club again this year, just talking about bouncing back after that injury.
I'm just happy to be on the ice, honestly. As my dad reminded me to be grateful for where I am, especially for where I come from. So I kind of keep that in my heart, and I'm just happy to be playing, and I'm gonna try to prove to myself and to the team that I'm trying to make the team here.
Long shot, you think, for Brady Keeper? I mean, he's got one-way money, right? And then he's UFA at the end of this year. This is sort of the blank or get off the pot season for him, and not only for him but also for the Canucks.
Right, but he hasn't played a game of hockey in over a year.
Yeah.
And really, when the injury happened at training camp a year ago, he had gone through last offseason. Like, it's been a long time since this guy has been able to be in a position to play games. And so I asked him just about the excitement level here, as through 2 days on a Friday afternoon, it's possible and probably likely, if they're dressing two squads on Sunday, that Brady Keeper is going to find himself a place to play. Like, how excited is he just to get back and to test himself and feel those competitive juices and all that kind of stuff? And that's where he said, like, just grateful to be here. It was interesting. He's a fascinating guy from Cross Lake, Manitoba, First Nations. And he repeatedly said throughout his media availability today, where I come from. And so it's clear, like, that's, he represents himself, but he's representing his family, and really he's playing for all the people back home. And so you kind of want to pull for him after the injury last year. And I will say this, like, he's not the biggest guy in the world, but a right shot defenseman. Even in drills here at training camp, like, he only has one speed, and he finishes checks. And, I think a couple times he's caught some guys by surprise. And if you're out on the ice, like, you should be prepared at all times. It's a contact sport, but I think maybe some guys let up. It's training camp, whatever. Like, there's none of that in Brady Keeper. And so he's kind of a fascinating character to me, but I just think he needs reps. I think he needs game action. And so I'd be shocked if he was able to play at a level high enough after being off for basically a year and a half. I think he needs to go to Abbotsford and play and become a call-up option for the Vancouver Canucks at some point. But I don't want to write him off, and that's what training camp of the preseason's for. But I'd be very, very surprised if he did enough to surpass some of the guys that we have in front of him on the depth chart to stick with the big league team when the season begins.
Yeah, he's not waiver exempt as well. So that's a tough decision for the team. If he's going to make the team, he's going to have to make the team. Okay. Let's hear from Brock Besser, though, because you had a chance to speak with him yesterday here at training camp. And, obviously it was a tough year for Brock Besser. He mentioned that in that wonderful piece that Michael Russo did with him from The Athletic in Minnesota. And he just talked about just having a clear mind going into this season.
No, I wouldn't say there's pressure. It's just last year is obviously a very tough year and mentally and stuff. So, it's just a lot different. I say that obviously, with my dad's passing, there's not as much to worry about. So I can really focus on hockey, and my mom's going to be able to travel and see me play in a lot of places and come out here. So, that's really exciting for me and see her a lot. And, just being able to really focus on the game now and help our team win is really exciting for me.
Think about the weight that is off the shoulders of Brock Besser, obviously with his dad's passing being, it's extremely tough for him. But everything else that Duke went through leading up to, his passing this year, like all the different hardships that he's had to get through, and Brock has had to wear all of that as he's sort of moved through, his college years and then now be in professional hockey. That's just a massive weight that's going to be off his shoulders. And honestly, if he has a career year this year, like, it would be no surprise, I don't think, really, to anybody.
Yeah, I have a ton of respect for Brock Besser and a ton of time when I think of the challenges that he's had to face. He's a 25-year-old. Like, he's still a young man. And you're right. Like, why Duke was forced to deal with the hardships that he was in life. Like, nobody should be, time and time again, the Parkinson's and cancer. And he was in a terrible automobile accident at one point, and you do wonder, like, why one man? And Yeah, I mean, it had to be so hard for Brock, but also part of Brock's story is the fact that like he lost one of his best friends, in his teenage years,
right.
and he was overseas playing in a tournament and couldn't be there. Like this guy suffered an awful lot of loss and has had to grow up in a real hurry and has handled himself so well as a pro. And so, I hope he dedicates the season to Duke. Duke will always be there in his memory, but just in terms of, having his mind at home while he's trying to focus on games, like that had to be so difficult last year. And so, he talked about it. Like, mom's going to be able to travel now and come see him. And she couldn't do that because she couldn't leave her husband, in his time of need over this last year and a half, and the pandemic and everything else. So let's just, Brock's had a nice start to camp here again on that line with Miller and Pearson, big bodies, should be able to control the puck down low, win some puck battles, and Brock being the shooter that he is, if they can get him the puck in the right spots, you want to believe that he's going to come out and score a bunch of goals for the Vancouver Canucks. And, I asked him yesterday, just because that number 30 that has kind of hung over him, he's been close, that was there as a rookie at 29, but, has not been a 30-goal scorer. I asked him if this is the year.
30 is always a number that's kind of been associated with you. You kind of feel like that's the target, and is this the year?
This is the year. That's all I got to say. This is the year.
There you go. Definitive from Brock Besser there. It's funny. I'm on his elite prospects page, and these are great because they give you, USHL and, back into his high school years. Guess how many years he has had 30 or more goals? From Burnsville High all the way through the University of North Dakota, Waterloo Blackhawks of the USHL into the NHL. Guess how many 30-goal seasons he's had?
Well, a lot of those lower levels, you don't play that many games, which I think would make it more difficult. I'll say one. I think there's probably been a 30-goal season in there.
Just one. 57 games played with the Waterloo Blackhawks in the USHL. He had 35 goals that year. In the NHL, as we know, 29, 26, and then 23 twice. And then he had that 1 year where he had just the 16 goals. But yeah, that's got to be the mark for Brock Besser this year. And he obviously agrees with you. Luke Shen, though, thinks that Besser, he's going to have a breakout season.
Personally, I got a hunch. I think, Brock's going to be good this year. I thought he was decent in the scrimmage today. And I think everyone's just going to continue to improve. I mean, obviously, we've got a ton of new faces. I think, Curtis Lazar is going to help out and kind of stabilize things on the fourth line. That quoted Joshua, too. Obviously, I watched a lot of St. Louis Blues games, with my brother being there. So I watched him a lot last year. I think he's effective, and you just kind of had a little more size up front. I think, you obviously need skill, and you can get away with having some small guys, but you definitely need some guys who are tough in the hard areas, which is the corners, the front of the net. Lazar's laying down blocking my shot today and in the practice. So stuff like that, which you need guys like that who are, do the hard work and the gritty work. And at the end of the day, those guys are just as important as the next guys if you want to win.
Yeah. And Luke Shen obviously talking about Brock Besser there at the start. And I think many people would agree that they think that Besser perhaps could be the breakout season for the Canucks this year. But then mentioning names like Curtis Lazar, Dakota Joshua, and the thing about Joshua is that he's massive. Like on the ice, you're like, holy, like he really sticks out. And the fact that Shen brought up those two guys, I think that he can appreciate their game because they're play similar games in terms of hard-nosed sort of style. But they're also going to bring something, I feel, to the Canucks that is much needed. And if this team is going to take that next step to be able to compete, to try to be a playoff team, they're going to need guys like Lazar and Joshua.
Low-key, one of my favorite moments through 2 days of training camp was Luke Shen in midseason form holding court with the media for well over 10 minutes. Like a lot of these guys, they come in, they're asked 3 or 4 questions, and they're gone. And Luke Shen is old school that way. Like he just loves talking about hockey. It doesn't matter, if it's one media guy or a big scrum. And by the way, we're back to scrums, and this is something that wasn't lost on a lot of these players because they haven't had microphones shoved in their face for a couple of years through the pandemic. But Luke Shen just standing in there, he's just such a champ that way. A great quote, and I love the fact, he's got the scouting report on Dakota Joshua because, he watched his brother play a bunch in St. Louis last year. So, of course, he saw Dakota Joshua play for the Blues, Curtis Lazar dropping and blocking a shot in the scrimmage, trying to make an impression on the coaching staff and his new teammates. And I think this is really interesting, too. When the groupings were released on Thursday morning, one of the things that jumped off the page was Jason Dickinson is back in the middle. Like, he's back. He was centering a line. We talked all summer about Curtis Lazar being brought in as a fourth line center, and Lazar started on the right side, Joshua over on left wing. And of course, that meant Nils Höglander was essentially with an AHL line with Nils Zaman and Linus Karlsson. But in the scrimmage, we saw that there's sort of a method to the madness here. And look, well documented, Jason Dickinson not good in faceoffs. Like, that's just not his thing, right? Like we said last year, basically lost his job because he couldn't win a faceoff. But they had Dickinson taking his draws on his strong side, and then Lazar on his side. So it may be a little bit of a job share in that regard. And you would like to think that that would help Jason Dickinson if he doesn't have to worry as a left-hander trying to take faceoffs on his weak side. Then maybe that will boost his winning percentage just because he'll strictly be a strong side guy. And then you've got Curtis Lazar there to do his thing when the time calls. Now, it's important that they have a right shot center. They went through all of last year. Brandon Sutter wasn't available to them, and so it was nothing but lefties. And there are situations where you want to put guys in a position to win you a key draw. And so I think it's important the Canucks have that in their arsenal. I think it's one of the reasons they went out and they targeted Curtis Lazar. And so it'll be interesting to see if Lazar stays on the wing or if that is sort of a game-by-game situation. But, it did jump off the page at me, at least to start, that Jason Dickinson, who didn't look the part of a centerman last season, essentially was shuffled to the wing. He was back in the middle, and we'll see how long that experiment continues here through the preseason.
A couple of things that stood out at the scrimmage and during the drills today at training camp. I love looking at the goaltenders. I thought Thatcher Demko is in fine form already. He made a couple of just absolutely lights out saves in the scrimmage and made them look very easy. I wasn't all that impressed with Spencer Martin. They did this little battle drill there where they had the two nets real close to one another. It was a little 1-on-1 and then a 2-on-2 between them. Spencer Martin let in a few softies there. I mean, obviously not going to judge his entire performance off that, but just that sort of stood out. Colin, I always butcher his last name. Delia? Am I getting this right?
Delia.
Yeah, Delia. There we go. Colin Delia. I'm wondering if, perhaps he really pushes that for that backup spot. I don't know if it's solidified as Spencer Martin just yet.
Yeah, I mean, certainly Spencer Martin is penciled in ahead of him on the depth chart, but the preseason is open competition. And ultimately, coaches, I have found over my years covering the game, coaches like goalies that stop pucks. And so, yeah, I know, it's crazy. But, so that's why preseason is preseason. And guys have to get out there and get the job done ultimately. And Delia's got NHL experience. He also has an association with Jeremy Colleton, having played for him in the Chicago system. And so, I think he'll start. My hunch is he'll start the year in the American Hockey League, but that's what we say. And we've said it for a while. Like, there is pressure on Spencer Martin. He's got the contract now. He was incredible in his 2 stints here, but I think it's really important, Andrew, to remember Spencer Martin ran with a .950 save percentage in the National Hockey League last year. Nobody does that over the long haul, right? Like, he did catch lightning in a bottle, and he had that 50 shot against the Oilers, the game that got to overtime, and was lights out good. He was. Like, I'm not here to detract from what he did last year, but nobody runs with a .950 save percentage over the long haul. So, yeah, I think it's fair to expect that there's going to be a slight drop-off. He's going to give up some goals. Shooters in the NHL are good. But he's earned this opportunity. And so I think he's going to be given every opportunity to show that he can be the backup here. But I like the move of bringing in a guy with some NHL experience, just to be that buffer and to push, as you said. And so, I'm not writing it in stone that Spencer Martin is the backup to start the season, but I certainly am expecting that is going to be the way. But more of that is this discussion now that's making the rounds of, how many is too many for Thatcher Demko? And we've kicked that around in the past, but, he was asked the other day on Wednesday ahead of training camp, and he's like, yeah, I've got a number in mind, but, you start the season. And so it's great to have a plan until the plan changes. And if you're Bruce Boudreau and you're coaching for the playoffs and you're coaching for a contract and you know what you've got, and that's a possible Vezina caliber goaltender in Thatcher Demko, it's going to be tough to go away from him. And we saw that last year. But we also saw that in the end, Demko was worn into the ground, and they can't afford to have that happen again. So they're going to need like not just nights to give Demko a break, those backups, whoever it is, and it could end up being a tandem of backups, but you need some wins. Like, it's not enough for Spencer Martin just to have earned an NHL contract. It's a what have you done for me lately league. He's got to get out and deliver. And you know me, I always say, like, 35 wins from your starter. I think you need 10 from your backup. A minimum of 10 wins from the backup. And if Thatcher Demko plays close to 60 games, let's say that leaves 22 to 25 starts for the backup. Can you get 10 wins out of those 22 or 25 games? I mean, that's going to be difficult, but that's the challenge, I think, ahead for the Vancouver Canucks.
Rink Wide, pre-game, post-game, every game, presented by Bodog. From sports odds to free casino games, make a play at Bodog.net. Would you make this play, JPat? We talked about the Norris Trophy futures. They have it out on Bodog now. And I know the last episode we batted around the Hart Trophy and also the Vezina with Patterson, Miller, and then Demko. Quinn Hughes to win the Norris, plus 2,000. Buddy, that's enticing right there.
Yeah, unfortunately, he plays in the time of Cale Makar, and you just wonder if Cale Makar has a firm grasp on the Norris for a bunch of years. There's so many good young defensemen in the National Hockey League. Owen Power stepping in as the full-time guy this year, but I still think that Cale Makar is the favorite. He's the guy to beat, but can Quinn Hughes rise to the challenge? Remember last year at this time, it was all about, can he shore up his defensive game? And he showed last year that he can do that. I will say this, like at first glance yesterday when he hit the ice on Thursday, he looks like he's filled out a bit. Like he looked bigger through the shoulders to me. And I haven't had a chance to talk to him about what exactly he did in the off season, but it was just, to me, it was like, he looks like he's bulked up a little bit. So he says that, I saw a quote somewhere. He said he'd worked on his shot again. That's an area. The voters love goals, right? Like the sexy part of the game, even if it's an award for defensemen. I do think that Quinn Hughes has to find a way to inject a few more goals along the way if he's going to get the attention of Norris voters. So, 2,000 shows that he's a long shot, but maybe there's some value there if you think that he's going to rise to the occasion here and be the best defenseman in the National Hockey League. The Canucks certainly would welcome that. It's going to be a difficult road to hoe with Cale Makar and Adam Fox and Miro Heiskanen and Rasmus Dahlin. They've got a couple of guys in Buffalo that they think are going to develop into Norris caliber defensemen as well. So we're lucky to be alive in this era of just so many good young defensemen, and there's no question Quinn Hughes is one of them.
Let us know if you're going to make that bet. Hit us up in the Great Clips inbox, 778-402-9680. You can always get in touch with us via our social media as well, at Rink Wide Podcast. That's on Twitter, on Instagram as well. And be sure to follow Rink Wide in Toronto as well, as we have the sister podcast with the Rink Wide in Toronto. And congratulations to David Alter, everyone behind that. We're branching out here at Rink Wide, and we are at the end of this, JPat. Greatest Canuck to wear the number. We have got the final three numbers. Now, two of them, there was only individual players that wore them. So it was 92. We all know Vasily Podkolzin. 95, Justin Bailey wore that briefly for the Canucks. 96, we talked about on the last podcast, and I am going to forever be on this hill. I will die on this hill forever. I don't know if you can die more than once, but anyway, I will. Pavel Bure's number 96. And we didn't leave it to a vote because it's not fair to Pavel Bure, to those that aren't named Pavel Bure, and Adam Gaudette, and now Andrei Kuzmenko. But those are the three players to wear the number 96. You know where I stand on this, JPat. You've got Pavel's 10 in the rafters. Nobody else should be allowed to wear 96, but looks like there's going to be a third edition to that this year.
Yeah, Kuzmenko's wearing it here in training camp, and I'm not here to make comparisons to Pavel Bure, but I said off the top, a couple of big-time snipe goals just in line rushes that has to get the fan base excited that this guy is going to bring those skills that he put on display to be the second leading scorer in the KHL and have them translate here into the National Hockey League. I would say 2 days into training camp, it's been a very good start for Andrei Kuzmenko, but I'm kind of with you. 96 to me, hallowed ground. I'm not sure that anybody needed to be wearing it, but it's his. He's not the Russian Rocket, but he is a new Russian in the Vancouver Canuck lineup.
Man, Adam Gaudette just sullied the number like that. That
was a weird play.
It was. It really was. I mean, Kuzmenko might be able to fill those shoes. Adam Gaudette certainly couldn't. Maybe perhaps they'll be talking about Adam Gaudette on Rink Wide Toronto because he's their problem nowadays. All right, JPat, so
he's playing with Tavares and Marner right now in the first couple of days of their training camp.
There you go. He's got Adam Gaudette breakout season. You heard it here first. All right, what do we got left here? We got one more day of training camp, and then, we're on this weekend. We've got our first post game that we'll be delivering to you on Sunday. The Canucks have a split squad. They're going to be playing Calgary home and away. We'll be at the home game, obviously, and we'll give you the full post game of that one, but looking forward to it here as, as we mentioned on the other podcasts that we've done recently, it's go time now.
Yeah, and, if people have come to Rink Wide here in the off season, this is what we do. I mean, in my mind, the post-game pod is our bread and butter. I mean, I love talking about training camp and, between games, certainly there are storylines to get into, but we had fun, all 82 last year. Let's hope that there are a few more. I mean, there'll be more than 82 because we're starting with the preseason, but let's hope that there's some postseason hockey to digest as well. That will be determined over the course of the 82 game regular season, but we'll get to the rink and watch the game. We'll try to keep our eye as best we can on the game that's in Calgary and storylines that are presented there, but most of the focus on this first post-game pod will be on the game that's played at Rogers Arena. Maybe find out on Saturday after camp breaks here in Whistler, which lineup is going to Cowtown, which one's going to play in front of the home fans. Generally, teams dress a better lineup at home for the paying spectators, and the team that sent out on the road, a little bit of sacrificial lamb. But, there's ways to evaluate. Like if you send some young guys into Calgary and the Flames dress a decent lineup, that's evaluation. It allows you to see where guys measure up. And I don't know if the Flames are going to run out Huberdeau and Uyghur in game number 1 to, give their fans a look at the big offseason changes. Whatever the case, I would expect that Calgary dresses a better lineup at home, and the Canucks likely to dress a better lineup at Rogers Arena. But keep in mind, too, there are the NHL veteran minimums. So, there are veterans have to play in all of those games. And, sometimes that's why guys are brought in on PTOs. But I get a sense, as we talked about a little earlier, that it's not just a, quota filling for Danny DeKeyser. I think that there might be an opportunity for him. So let's see if he suits up here as early as Sunday afternoon. But I'm really excited. Year number 2, learned a lot from year 1, and we think we've polished up the product just a little bit here. So really excited to get her going and get back to the rink and then start to break down hockey games and serve them up on our post-game podcast.
Yeah, that's when you'll hear our next podcast, but we'll have a video to sort of put a bow on this training camp that we'll release tomorrow on all our social media platforms. If you're not following us on any of them, at Rink Wide Podcast, Twitter, Instagram, but also Rink Wide Vancouver on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe to us on YouTube as well. Rink Wide Vancouver. And make sure you make the distinction because there is now also a Rink Wide in Toronto as well. All right, JPat, looking forward to the post game that we have on Sunday coming up here. Looking forward to getting back into the rink and watching some NHL action. Remember, Rink Wide, pregame, post game, every game. For JPat, I'm Wadden. And also remember, Rink Wide is the show. And always score.